Hey everybody, this is Mike Abboud. I'm joined by Vlad Shustov. Welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be discussing the cost of IT and how some folks are calculating it incorrectly. It's become more and more of a relevant topic where organizations don't really appreciate everything that goes into their IT budget. Some folks kind of set it and forget it. They have a mentality of just buying an appliance, putting it on a shelf, forgot that they bought it, and don't recognize the costs attributed to maintenance, the amortization of that physical appliance, and also the risk associated with not updating or maintaining that appliance or solution or service on a regular basis. So we're going to get started here. Please participate in the chat. Look forward to hearing from you with some questions, and we'll get going here. So Vlad, here you go.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So my name is Vlad Shustov. Vladimir is my full name. It's very easy to compare to a Russian president if you want to make that connection. I'm a project manager here at TetherView, and I am actually involved with a lot of our current customers and a lot of the onboarding projects where we do this kind of calculation pretty thoroughly, and we look at what our customers are paying for today in terms of IT. And then we show them the savings of what happens when you convert to a sort of a fully comprehensive cloud-based IT infrastructure. Just quickly to run you through the webinar agenda, we'll begin by introducing Michael, who is our founder and CEO, and he actually has an interesting story to tell on how and why he found TetherView. Then we'll kind of talk about why IT matters today. I'm sure every day people hear about cybersecurity breaches, different incidents that go on, and because we're so dependent on technology these days, it's critical to really understand how much IT matters to your business. Then right after, we'll go into the major components of what a normal IT infrastructure looks like today for an average business and what it should look like in order to kind of stay within regulation compliance and also to provide the adequate levels of cybersecurity. Then we'll do an actual dive in, and we'll go line by line, looking at servers, desktops, literally everything that you might be paying for today and you're not realizing the ongoing costs. Then right after, we'll discuss a little bit on what it would actually cost you if you face a data breach as a small business or medium-sized firm. And we'll also show you how to calculate that breakdown. Of course, cost of not being compliant is another topic that a lot of people are asking for, so we'll kind of touch upon it. Of course, we'll finish the presentation with a little Q&A session, and also we'll share more information about TetherView and what kind of services we provide. So with that being said, we actually have a polling question for you guys, just kind of to get started and get an idea of what you're looking for in this session.
So again, what we hope to provide everyone on the webinar today is we'd like you to learn a little about TetherView and the services we provide you with a new perspective on how IT should be handled, and make sure that you're not overpaying for tech. A lot of folks are paying for services that overlap dramatically, and we're guilty of it ourselves here, where we have solutions that have some unique pieces, part of them, but for some reason we overlap a lot of these things, and that's just because there are not a lot of options out there in the market. And our solution is that we're able to provide you with a custom environment. And then, of course, we want you to understand the value at risk in the digital economy, and we'll get into that. So thanks for responding. It's pretty even kind of what everybody wants to get out of here, so thank you for participating. So without further ado, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mike Abboud. I'm the founder and CEO of TetherView. And again, what we hope to do is provide you with a perspective of where we see the world is headed, and in terms of IT and how your users and business should interact. Interestingly enough, if you've been around long enough and you've had the benefit of working on a terminal screen in the old mainframe days, where there was a green screen and it just had a keyboard, not even a mouse, that's really where TetherView has taken us back to, where that terminal, that user interface, that device is no longer a risk to the organization. And the reason why we went down this path is my previous life, I was in the healthcare space, and healthcare has a very fragmented approach to IT. Every group, every specialty has a different way of handling it. I was heavily involved in radiology, and radiology department would almost have its own independent IT infrastructure. Orthopedics, you name it, every kind of organization, part of the IT organization of a healthcare company is completely separate. And when I was at the helm of a healthcare organization, we had the same issue where I had 4 email servers going on at once, different IT managers, different IT directors, and it was really, really hard for us to get a hold of the real whole picture without having to go through a lot of hoops. So we built TetherView, or the beginnings of TetherView, as a need, because there was no solution out there in the market today. And what we've done is we are building essentially a digital bunker for each of our clients, and we put that digital bunker in a private cloud. And that what allows us to do is put an inordinate amount of controls, levers, provide clients and users with the performance that they need, but also giving them the security and compliance that the stakeholders of an organization want, and all at the same time without impeding on performance and productivity. So again, TetherView is this end-to-end solution that's going to make it cheaper, safer, and more collaborative for you to work in the cloud as a whole organization, as a business.
All right, so kind of to lay the ground here, and we've been trying to advocate this new way of thinking about your business. And essentially what we like to do is, whenever we do this kind of sessions, we like to ask each of our participants, what business are you in? And usually the answers that we get is, yeah, I'm an accountant, I'm a financial advisor, I'm a wealth manager. I mean, this is what I do, this is what I know best. So essentially the answer to that is, what business are you in? I'm an accountant. That's what it is. However, now this is where the major thinking shift is supposed to happen, because we're so dependent on technology these days. Every accountant, every lawyer, anyone you name would have to have some kind of digital device, whether to send out emails, to do communication over the internet, to create files, store any kind of data, tax returns, right? Everything is done digitally. So now the fundamental shift that's supposed to happen in everyone's mind in order to manage this properly is that you're not just an accountant, you're not just a banker. What you have is a digital business that just happens to provide accounting services. And as the world continues to develop, and what we'll see, a lot of the processes will start getting automated. But you need to really understand where this is going and what's happening to our account. And with that kind of being the fact, the main risk to an organization also comes from technology. Without technology, you would not be able to provide your services. If your technology is not sufficient, it might be pulling you back. You want to make sure you have the right platform, the right infrastructure to support you and to enable you to do your tasks better and more efficiently. So kind of what are some of the risks associated with technology? And we call them digital risks. One of them is actually, if you just go ahead and click, so what's the value, I guess, of not taking it?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right? I mean, so that's the question that everyone needs to ask themselves. Whether you're in the service provider space, there's several of you that are reselling our product here on the call, and you're a managed service provider, you need to get your business, your client, or your business owner and board to understand what's the real value at risk. That's a significant question that we always try to drive home. So the loss of intellectual property, most companies don't recognize that, regardless of how small you are, they don't really have the mindset where they're identifying intellectual property. And I'll give you two quick examples. We recently had a call from a potential client that they were hit by ransomware. And what they didn't recognize, and I won't spend too much time belaboring this one, but what they didn't recognize is that it was not a ransomware attack. The ransomware attack was diversionary, and the real attack happened weeks before, where a competitor in a different country stole their IP. It was a patented technology that they owned, and the ransomware attack was just kind of a little gift to kind of hide the footsteps. It really didn't hide the footsteps that well. The folks that were working on the threat response team were able to quickly identify that. And that risk is not something that's going to affect the company today. I'm going to give you another example of a well-known hack. It's the Uber hack that happened in 2016. 6 million records of their drivers were taken right out of the front door from their database. And Uber paid, I think, a $500,000 fine. I forget with what government agency, as a fine and a slap on the wrist. But the value at risk for Uber was not the fine, okay? And it wasn't the PII that went out the door. It was the IP that was behind that database. And so if you look at what happened since 2016 through today, there are probably 4 to 5 major competitors competing with Uber. And they were successful, and their ramp-up periods were much, much quicker than Uber. Some people would say that ramp-up period was due to just Uber paving the way and being the pioneer, and they were riding their coattails. I happen to think that ramp-up period was also because they knew, some of these competitors probably knew who Uber's drivers were. So imagine you want to start up an Uber competitor, and you have this database, how good the drivers are, how much they perform, what their ratings are, what the cost of insurance, all of this really good analytics on each of these drivers. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to randomly email these guys and girls and say, hey, would you like to drive for, Acme Co? And we'll pay you 25 cents more a mile. I'm not exactly sure how much they pay, but they would probably do it because it's really indifferent and it doesn't cost them anything to sign up for another driver. So it's really important as you're working and looking at your IT, examining best practices, that you really understand the value at risk. And the loss of intellectual property is not necessarily a patent or copyright or a contract. It could be something as simple as the list of your employees. The other thing that's important to do is, of course, the breach of confidential information. That's more serious. That's pretty straightforward. An example is an accounting firm. And of course, if you're an accounting firm, you want to make sure things are buttoned up. But you would be amazed at how many businesses, large, small, I'm not going to pick on accountants specifically because it's across the board, large, small, sophisticated, public, not public, regulated, not regulated, don't take this seriously enough. And they're really not understanding what's at risk in the event of a breach because no one's really put that in front of them. And it's never a problem until it is a problem. We have this little anecdote that we like to say, at TetherView, our job is to keep the scissors out of the kindergartner's hands and keep that kindergartner from running around the kindergarten and stabbing another kid in the eye or something like that. And we can all picture that. But that's really what's going on out there. Yeah, it's fine if he runs around the kindergarten and no one's there, but there's someone's going to get hurt eventually, and there's going to be a loss. The other value at risk is disruption to business. We have a client that we're working with, and it's unfortunate that we speak to a lot of folks, and they're interested, but they wait for an event to really catalyze the conversation with us. They have this mentality of, hey, it can't happen to me. But it does. And the disruption to your operations, that's really not something that's tangible. We have a client yesterday that called us up. We've been working with them for a while. They're a little slow to get moving. They're nervous about making a change, even though we take the risk away from. And they said, hey, we got hit by ransomware. And we told them that they were at risk for it. And of course now they're at a rush. But the real issue for them is they lost 2 days of operations. What does that cost them? Can they ever get that money back? Are there opportunities that were lost? So you really need to ask yourself, hey, if I was completely out of business for 2 days and the rest of the world wasn't, could I survive that? Right? Can I survive a ransomware attack? And what is at risk in the event if I do get hit? Of course, the other values at risk are your hardware going down during ransomware. We often see that some of these bugs are pretty nasty and they get down to the BIOS level of your machines and infect these machines to the point where you can't get them back up and running. And it's really hard to make that game time decision if you haven't planned for this. So if you get hit by ransomware and you haven't thought of all the different permutations of ransomware that could come out there, and all of a sudden you get hit, and at that moment you're trying to plan for it, it's way too late, right? And again, one of these things is hardware replacements. Sometimes, depending on how you're backing up your data can't be restored unless it's put back and restored to the same exact type of bare metal that it's on. So you really need to put an analysis together that really looks at all the different types of attacks and what the value is at risk and how long it would take you to recover. And can you put a number on it, right? Can you really quantify the loss of a client, right? If you're an accounting firm and that data gets out there, do you really know when that client's going to make a decision and say, hey, you know what, that ransomware put me over the attack, put me over the edge, or in 2 years your pricing goes up, and then they're thinking in the back of their head. So it's really, really hard to do this, but you really, really need to sit down and do this analysis and put the time in and understand. And of course, as I just mentioned, that lost customer, the loss of trust from your customer. Will your customers continue to do business with you if you're the source of their compromised data? And it's one thing to say that you're the source of the compromised data, but if it was really, really some basic housekeeping that you could have prevented that loss, will the customers be comfortable with continuing the relationship with you? So we have another polling question coming up here. Have you experienced a cyber breach? If you could just take some time, we just want to get a sense of have you been breached? It's interesting, a lot of people are immediately saying no, but I know someone who has. We get it. No one wants to admit it. This is completely private poll here. The other thing that comes up, and most people don't get, is according to the FBI, 95% of every bank out there has been breached in one way or another, but only 30% of them have admitted to it. And that brings up another interesting question, So how do you know if you've been breached, right? What is the definition of a breach? And are you going to be able to evolve to adapt to the new types of breaches that are out there? I can tell you that every single day the attack vectors are changing. 2 years ago, most of it was on the edge, and they were coming at you from kind of brute force type of attacks, open door type of attacks. Today, they're coming from inside out. They're man-in-the-middle attacks, and you need to be able to evolve. And that's one of our pieces of our secrets, is that TetherView is not a static solution. So you're buying our evolution. We're constantly evolving. As we get bigger, as we get better, as we see more, we're able to adapt to the different types of threats that are out there. So there's two main components of IT operations and attack vectors that you really got to watch out for. It's protecting your data and protecting access. So the first step in protecting your operations, in our opinion, is identifying your crown jewels. Okay, we all understand that there's certain data you just need to be able to share with everybody, but do you have to have everybody see everything? So one of the first parts of an assessment that we do with a client as they're being onboarded is we ask them to take the time and identify their crown jewels. What is it that needs to be protected? Does everybody in the organization, internal to the organization even, need to see everything? And certainly from an external facing, are you taking extra steps to put layers between that crown jewel, that sensitive data, and the outside world? At TetherView, that's built in, it's inherent to our solution. So we're able to, if you tell us, we can't tell you what your crown jewels are. If you tell us what the crown jewels are, we can put ring fence after ring fence, and then also do things like give you an alert. If you have extremely sensitive data, we can send you an alert every time somebody touches, looks at, opens, does anything to that file. You would be amazed at how many curious eyes are out there once you have this data. Now, we don't recommend that you do this for everything, and that's why it's important to prioritize what's important to you. Is your data stored in a secure and controlled environment, right? Back to, do you need to put the ring fences around all of this data? You know, are you protecting your data from the different threats? Do you have the analytic tools in place, the reporting tools to tell you that there was a breach? A lot of these breaches today are not the traditional kind of in the front door. If you're getting hit with ransomware, that's probably just they're getting lucky. But if someone wants to go after you, and you are a target for whatever reason, and it could be an employee, it could be a nefarious actor within your organization, do you have the ability to protect your data from those different types of threats? And TetherView does, right? And again, back to the first step, it's identifying the crown jewels. At TetherView, we operate in the sense that we're not impenetrable. Knock on wood, we've never been breached. We never had a ransomware attack, but we're always operating in a way as if we were to get breached. So we have lots of triggers, we have lots of switches that we can flip to protect from many different types of threats, but we also have many, many different types of backups. Our backup process is always evolving based on a number of best practices, but we're always changing the methodologies and how we do backups, where we store our backups, and even internally, not everyone on our organization has access to all of the different switches in the environment. We put a lot of controls in place there. Some real basic stuff that we just want to cover is, can you detect unauthorized access to your environment? If someone were to log into your computer today in the middle of the night, would you even know about it? And the answer in most situations is no. Most organizations have no way of doing that and doing it effectively. That's the other part of this thing. TetherView does. We have the ability, every time you log into your virtual desktop or into your environment, or every time you touch a crown jewel, you'll get an alert that tells you, hey, was this you logging in at 8:55? And it's also just a good way to keep honest people honest. You know, if you know, you have the front door open, you know, you get somebody that comes by, he's going to jiggle the lock and see if it's open. He might walk in. But if the door is locked, that honest person is not going to break out a crowbar and get in the front door. Do you have an access policy in place? Again, are you thinking about the crown jewels? Are you determining who should access what, where, and how? And of course, you know, do you have an effective way for your employees to work remotely? And if you're allowing your employees to work remotely, is your data prolific? In other words, if your employee's working from home, or you have a consultant that's working from home and has access to your information, do they have that data on their computer? And can that computer go offline? And will they have access to your data while that computer is offline? How important that is to you? How would you like to be able to say, hey, it's not working out with John Doe, my new salesperson, and we move on, and bygones be bygones. I don't have to worry that John has a laptop with all of my crown jewels on it, because my data never leaves the TetherView data center. And then, of course, do you have a way to share your data securely? It's important that you're not giving up on functionality and performance and efficiency for security. At TetherView, it's always kind of security first, but performance is above that by a little bit, right? So anytime we implement some sort of new way to secure, lock down an environment, we always make sure it's not going to be impractical for someone to access their data. My dad is an older guy, and he's not exactly tech savvy, but he uses a virtual desktop every single day, and it has changed his life. He used to get hit with ransomware, you know, I'd say weekly almost, you know, because he was using AOL and he had all sorts of bugs and all these things were going on. And we had no way of knowing what data went out the door, because he just did it. He was using his laptop, no computer, no password, nothing on there. But when he went to a virtual desktop, he never lost efficiency. And he's more efficient because he's not dealing with these constant broken computers and ransomware attacks and so on and so forth. And then at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, who is responsible for your IT? If you're outsourcing IT, okay, does your managed service provider have a fiduciary responsibility to you? Are they responsible for you? Do they know what your crown jewels are? In our opinion, there has to be somebody internal to the organization who takes ownership. Even if you come over to TetherView, again, we're not going to identify the crown jewels. We don't know that John should or shouldn't have access to that information at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. We don't know that it's out of practice for him to download your entire customer database. But if you tell us, hey, this database is extra sensitive, no one should have access to it, we'll make sure that anytime something goes on with that, you'll have information. So again, what is the value at risk? You really need to put a value on the loss. You really need to say, this is what's truly at risk if and when we were to be breached, and then how do we recover? So I'm going to hand it over to Vlad. We're going to do a quick total cost of ownership analysis, and this was really the driver behind our webinar here. So Vlad, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, because our main topic is the cost of IT and how to calculate it, what we wanted to do is sort of pick on an imaginary law firm. They have 18 employees, what a traditional environment would look like, where they still have some hardware, they have a server maybe in their office. So what we'll do here is kind of go line by line. And again, we weren't using the latest and greatest technology. This is just kind of an industry average to get an idea and start everyone sort of thinking about this kind of costs. So with servers hardware, we estimate for 3 years you would probably spend about $10,000 on the hardware alone, and that is your servers. That is how you're going to back up those servers. Whether you're using an on-site backup with another sort of array or you're doing a cloud backup, the cost would be there, and it is an additional cost to just what you're paying to buy the actual server. Now, UPS, you have to pay for the power supply for that server. You probably also have to pay for the racks, or depending on how you're setting it up, there's going to be some additional hardware costs. When looking at desktops, what we've kind of estimated is, in order to have a normal PC, including, let's say, a display, a keyboard, a mouse, and actually what we've seen in the real world, some companies pay more than $2,000 for a workstation. Over here, just to be a little more down to earth, we estimate about $1,000 per person for a workstation. That includes everything you need in order to, from a physical standpoint, just to have a device, a screen, and some kind of, whether a thin client or a thick client, just a local kind of machine to do all the processing and store all the information. Of course, there's going to be an installation cost when you're working with a managed service provider, or even if you have an IT department internally, it would still be a cost to them because they have to configure each device. When it comes down to software, again, this doesn't encapsulate everything an organization would probably pay for, but just from an infrastructure perspective, you would have to pay for your Windows or your operating system licensing. You would have to pay for your Office licensing. Probably 95% of businesses today use Microsoft. Hence, this is one of the reasons we tried to go with this in our example. For file sharing, whether you're using Dropbox or SharePoint, there's Hightail, there's a lot of different apps out there. We kind of estimated that maybe a company would pay about $25 a user a month. SQL license, if you have let's say a QuickBooks server, or you have another application internally, you have to have that database. An average SQL license will probably cost you about $2,500 over a period of 3 years. Now, when it comes down to backup, again, very, very, cost effective in a way. You can get a backup option to back up all of your files and all of your apps to a cold storage in the cloud somewhere. That would probably cost you about $500 a year. But with that in mind, if something does happen and you have to restore with this kind of backup, you would be looking at potentially days or weeks to bring back your data or to restore your environment. With antivirus and anti-malware, $2 a user a month is probably very conservative as well. Second factor authentication, not everyone is using it today, although this is highly recommended by all cybersecurity professionals in our industry to use a second factor authentication. If you look at the market to see what's available from a consumer standpoint, the usual pricing is right around $6 a user a month. Of course, it varies based on the functionality that you want to have. Around all of that, you would be paying taxes as well. So we're estimating about $35,000, $36,000 for 3 years just for your infrastructure software. When it comes down to setting everything up, there's going to be an additional cost. You have to configure and set up your server. You have to manage and configure your Active Directory. There's probably going to be a project management cost associated with this if you have a dedicated person kind of working on the whole project. Many times you would also see a charge for data migration from your previous infrastructure to your new server. Same goes for all of the desktops and laptops. It takes time to migrate the data. To set up your backup and your antivirus, there's going to be a cost as well. And then that's, again, $500 is probably very, on the minimal side of what the actual IT consultants charge today. When it comes down to supporting all of that infrastructure, what we estimate is right around $3,600 a month. That includes help desk, so that if something does break, you have a person to call. If your printer goes down, you know who your IT contact is. Many times, if something is not working where it says internal time spent on IT, that's simply if one of your lawyers is trying to print a document, right, a customer file, and the printer is not working. How long would it take to bring that printer back to life? So kind of on just monthly issues where employees are experience difficulties, we estimate about $400 a month. Cost of downtime, of course, hopefully you don't go down every single month. But if there is a downtime, if you lose electricity, if you lose internet, if something happens to your server and it has to be rebooted again, the cost of downtime could be pretty high when you have employees sitting in the same office and kind of looking at each other without a way to do anything. And kind of electricity and internet, we estimate about $200 and $300 a month. Again, these are kind of average and rough numbers, but if you put all of it together, your total cost of your infrastructure over 3 years would be right around $200,000. There's a lot of companies are paying more, a lot of companies are paying less, a lot of companies have no idea how much they're paying. So that kind of gives you an idea. If you break it down by year, you'd be looking to spend about $70,000. Now, if you do a further breakdown and you see how much you're spending a year per employee for this law firm, the total cost of IT infrastructure is right around $3,800. Now, if you compare that to S&P 500 averages, and there is a study that was done by Gartner recently, their number for an annual per employee cost is right around $7,000. So this kind of shows you that we are not using the greatest technology. We don't have all the security and analytics tools in place. This is just what a normal company would have in today's world. And of course, this does not cover cyber insurance, incident response, or any specific compliance reports that your regulators might ask for. This is just very basic what we've seen so far. Many of our customers have an infrastructure in place. This is what it would look like.
And another thing to highlight here is that this does not take into account. We're not looking at disrupting who your boots on the ground are. Those folks still stay in place. This does not include that tier 1 support person that's on site. That's additional. And so what I can tell you is the cost of TetherView is less than half of what a traditional environment is. We've done this analysis with many clients, and as long as they're honest with themselves, they always end up pointing out something that we forgot. We just did this with an organization that's a 280-person accounting firm, 6 full-time IT people, all very talented. and their cost was closer to the 7,000 number when it was all said and done. And we cut their IT costs probably by about 65% is what we're going to cut their cost by at the end of the day. Now it's a transition because again, that particular firm, they used to just buy stuff and just kind of write it off right there on the spot. But once they recognize that, hey, I've got to amortize the use of this device over X years, it really, really adds up. So we got another polling question here, if you guys wouldn't mind. Do you know the true cost of your IT? What is your IT's true cost? We'd love for you to answer these questions if you could, real quick. And have you ever gone through this exercise? A lot of organizations have not gone through it. About 50% of you have said you've done the exercise, and 25% are indicating that it's in the budget. So great. So we are glad that it's in the budget. As you have it in the budget, we encourage you to really look down granularly and make sure that you're capturing all of the costs associated with IT, even if you bought it a few years ago and you're using it today.
And now, quickly, we just wanted to take a look at how you could potentially estimate your cost during a potential data breach, or if your server does go down and you have employees kind of staring at each other. This is just one way to look at it. If you look at these statistics from the internet, what they're saying is for a small business, an average cost of a data breach is right around $120,000. That includes all of the downtime, that includes replacement of any hardware, that includes consultants and incident response. So if you're a small business and you do experience a data breach, this is just an average that we to pull. Now, for an enterprise, the number is, of course, much higher. Again, the average is just about $1 million. And of course, if you look at a bigger firm, if a Fortune 500 company faces a serious data breach, I mean, those numbers could be much, much higher. In fact, we've seen some costs break $1 billion for some of the largest organizations. And there's a number of those examples, actually.
And it goes back to kind of the anecdote that I mentioned earlier about Uber. Sometimes you just don't know. It doesn't quickly, and it's not right there in your face. This was the cost. If we look at what happened to Nortel, the Canadian technology company years ago, that was a slow and steady breach where their IP was stolen over the course of 4 years. And that breach, that theft of their IP, really led to the company having to get purchased by the Canadian government, now owned and I think run by the Canadian government. And it's a real dramatic issue, but it didn't happen immediately. Who knows what the breach on Uber is going to do, right? If one of these competitors come out there buying this information on the dark web, even though it might be stale now, it's nice to know, hey, I've got 6 million people around the world that are driving for Uber or drove for Uber. If I pay them an extra couple of dollars, what are they going to do for me? And that's the way you really need to look at what's the cost and really the value at risk.
Just quickly touch upon if you just have a downtime. So you just lose electricity at your office, you lose internet, something happens, you're not able to access your files. So one quick and easy way to calculate it is you look at the total cost or how much, let's say, again, in the example of the law firm, what is their hourly rate, right? And you multiply that hourly rate by the number of employees and the total sort of downtime figure. And so what you get from a single day alone, a law firm, by not being able to work, access their computers, or access their files, that cost is right around $20,000 to $30,000. This is not something that could potentially go on the books, but if you look at it from this perspective, it's very easy to tell that you cannot afford any downtime. You have to make sure that the infrastructure that you have set up is made to avoid any potential losses of productivity. All right. So when it comes down to compliance costs, this is another interesting topic, and we're going to see it so much more in the news now that GDPR is fully in power. Right. We have a lot of other countries, including Canada, Australia, sort of coming out with similar rules. But as an example, if you're doing business with European citizens and you do not take the proper measures and you do not secure your data, you don't fall within the GDPR compliance, where you know you're supposed to do it, but you don't do it. The potential total cost for that is up to 4% of your total global annual revenue. So for a bigger firm, this could be very, very catastrophic. For small business, the rules are pretty much the same. So no matter how much business you're doing, there is potential to lose 4% of your total revenue. And just recently, this week actually, Google was fined by the French government, I believe, for $57 million for not following the GDPR compliance and exposing some of their customers' data. We haven't seen as much enforcement in the United States yet, especially when it comes down to mid-sized and smaller businesses. But there is a lot of regulatory bodies that are going to start coming out after businesses, because there's more and more breaches that are happening every single day. The rules and the frameworks are out there, but many people, just because you have that mindset where it hasn't happened to me, so it's not going to happen to me, that is not going to run by them. And we highly predict that within the next year, maybe in 2019 and 2020, we'll see a lot of examples of smaller businesses getting fined for not following their risk and technology regulations.
And I'll give you a quick example of a breach that was just publicly announced by the Homeland Security. I think it was a couple months ago that the breach actually happened. It was a small electrical contractor who was doing work as a sub for one of the major utilities. And Homeland Security came knocking on their door and confiscated all their computers. What had happened was the hackers found the vulnerability through this subcontractor, recognized that they had the keys to the kingdom, and were able to potentially inflict harm on the grid because of this whole IoT situation out there, Internet of Things and little devices. So the hackers literally had their finger on the switch. Fortunately, the utility was able to identify it, brought in the authorities, and the authorities got there. But don't think that just because you're a small fish, you can't have big implications downstream. We've seen that the hacks and the smart hackers, if they want to go after the bigger guys like a Target, the Target breach is one of the most well-known and well-documented breaches out there. It was an HVAC contractor. An HVAC contractor, who would have ever think that an HVAC contractor had anything that was important? Forget their internal stuff and their employees, but because of that HVAC contractor's lack of IT hygiene, they were able to get in and steal 4 million credit card records from Target. And that was one of the first real major breaches out there that helped open everybody's eyes. What's really good today, and what I'm happy to see, is that bigger companies and regulators are forcing third parties to pay attention to this and really, really pick up their game. So if you're doing work for a big bank, let's say a Bank of America, and you're a sub to them, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a consultant, they're going to send you over a questionnaire, and you need to be able to respond to that. So one of the last questions here, whether we have one more after this, what should a business operators do about cyber risk? You'd be amazed at some of the bigger organizations that say, what's the cost, right? What's the risk? And if I were to get fined, we had a client kind of bring that up. What does it cost me if I do get fined by GDPR? I bought all my stuff in Best Buy. I'm happy with that. It's an exaggeration, but do I really need to spend money on this thing? I'm pleased to see that you are going to say continue with your current approach. That means you're doing it the right way. But most of the answers are we have 150% response. However that's happening. Bug, I guess, in the system with GoToWebinar. But most folks are responding saying seek qualified outside assistance. And that's really, really the case. If you are handling sensitive data, we encourage you to hire a professional, seek a cybersecurity analysis. One of our biggest referral sources for business are cybersecurity experts who are hired to do audits and assessments. And when they walk in there, they kind of put their hands up and say, hey, Mr. Customer, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. I'd like to recommend TetherView as one of the options. And that's what we encourage you to do. Even before you come to us, we are offering free assessments as part of this webinar today. We're going to offer a free assessment to anyone here. But if you hire a third party, get them to really look under the hood, be honest with them, and give them the keys. Make sure they're engaged properly, but make sure they have the ability to see everything and really do that risk. One of the problems with technology today is technology. Everyone thinks it's like this up and coming, it's supposed to be bleeding edge, but the way technology is sold is so old school. If you guys are familiar with a lot of it, there's so many layers and so many different people in the process of trying to buy technology. It's extremely inefficient. And because technology is still bought from the old guard, so to speak, it still has this hardware-based kind of mentality about selling and buying technology. And the other piece is that while you might go to a VAR, a value-added reseller who can sell you different pieces to come up to it, no one's put together a comprehensive offering like Tether. We challenge everyone to kind of go out there and say, find another offering that includes everything that we've put together. But more importantly, find another offering that's going to evolve and has the perspective of how to evolve like we do. And I think what you'll find is that there's none out there besides TetherView. So it's really important, as you go out there. The other problem is when you buy from party A, party B, party C, is everybody points fingers at each other. And that's where the real trouble becomes. It's not about making sure that the stuff talks to each other and integrates and, this software and this hardware are compatible. It's about what happens when it breaks down, right? Who's responsible when there's a problem? Well, guess what? If you are the end customer and you had the breach, okay, and you have multiple vendors, at the end of the day, you're going to take full liability for everything that's going to happen. And we see that time and time again where organizations kind of look outside and say, hey, I bought this from you. But then the response is, well, I'm just a piece of the puzzle. I didn't sell you the wrench. And again, what you see here at the bottom of the screen, it's technologies like buying today, it's still very much like buying an erector set where someone dumps the pieces on your desk without instructions and you got to put it together. As opposed to the way TetherView does it, it's basically, we build it for you. You get to try it before you buy it, and if you don't like it, you walk away. So it's a completely different approach.
This is absolutely right, and I just wanted to add a quick little comment here, specifically with IT infrastructure, so servers, computers, right? I guess anything that comes down to just supporting your applications, there's still a fragmented approach, and there's still a lot of product selling. Now, if you look at other companies, and some of the most successful companies today who are selling software, they don't sell you a product, they don't sell you just a software. What they sell is a solution. So you don't go to let's say a Microsoft just because you want email, for example. What Microsoft is going to try to sell you is pretty much with any email license, there's also going to be their applications. There's going to be something like Skype. They bundle in a lot of different services, and they essentially say, this is what kind of business you have, this is the kind of solution you need. And so what we're trying to do is kind of change the approach to selling IT infrastructure, where versus the customer figuring out and buying products where, okay, I need a new firewall, or I need a new anti-malware, I need a new antivirus. We're trying to sell a solution so that all of those pieces are handled and they're customized to fit your exact needs, so that they support your business, not just from a, well, maybe you need this or maybe you need that. So just wanted to kind of add it on that front, why TetherView is trying to sell a comprehensive service versus trying to just go after the easy targets like backup or cold storage or whatever it could be.
So again, right to that point, it's new world versus our way, which is the new world, and we reduce the number of moving pieces. So we've coined this term called frictionless cloud. And we define frictionless cloud as it's got to be easy to buy, it's got to be easy to turn on and get going, but it also needs to be seamless. So if you're interested in talking about the ones and zeros and getting into the nitty gritty on the technical piece, we're happy to do it. I'm a tech guy. I love doing that. But we don't sell that, right? We're selling you the fact that we're the experts, okay? I can tell you this, that tomorrow, the way we handle backups, the way we handle certain threats, it's not the same way as we're doing it today. And that's the problem with the way technology is sold today, is that you're stuck with these old world ways. We encourage you, if you're using, let's say, SAP and it's on-prem. We've moved many SAP clients who said, hey, I want to move to the SAP cloud. They recognize, oh man, I've got to change everything. Well, we're able to take that old way that you operate and move it into our frictionless cloud. So we give everybody the benefit of on-prem infrastructure, traditional way of doing it, but we give you the best of the cloud in the sense that it's there for you. You're not stuck to any internet connection. You're not stuck to any location. And again, we're always evolving. And that's probably one of our biggest advantages, is that A, we're extremely comprehensive, and B, we're always going to be ahead of the curve, both from a threat and a compliance perspective. So some of our key differentiators, again, are, number one, that we're extremely comprehensive. We handle everything for you, from security, your backups. You're not worried about backups anymore. You're not worried, did the backup work and tested? We test our backups daily because our clients are constantly losing files. So they're coming back to us and saying, hey, I need to restore. We don't charge for that. File sharing, it's included. We've taken the best of Dropbox, Google Docs, ShareFile, and we've built it into a private cloud, and we do it in a very secure and very compliant way. So you have the best of everything here. Mobile device management, it's a new service that we're offering. It's a flat fee price per user, and we've really taken mobile device management and put it on steroids. We can get into that detail, but it's no longer just about mobile device management. It's the fact that a user can pick up any device, go out onto the train, pick up a stranger's device. As long as you know your TetherView password and email, you're good to go. And you can access your information everywhere from any device without worrying about my data is left behind, or I lost that device. You know, you name it, we can secure that type of device. Our pricing is flat, right? We charge for very few line items. We charge for the number of virtual desktops. We charge for the amount of data that you have. And if you use mobile device management with us, we charge it based on the number of users that need mobile device management. Not everybody needs it. That's it. Our bills are not 7 pages. They're not even 7 line items. They're barely 3 line items. Very easy to predict what your IT costs are going to be in the future, and it's very easy to scale up and down. We typically put a very low minimum in our contracts with regards to the number of users, and the best part of this thing is an extremely low-risk contract. So we will build your production environment for you, and your billing will only start after you go through user acceptance. If you're unsatisfied for any reason, we walk away. We want happy customers. I'm going to let Vlad quickly go through our security and compliance features here, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, so I'll be very brief here. We only have about 3 minutes left. It's funny, once you start talking about some of these subjects, you can just go on and on forever. But as you can see here, we've put a lot of different tools and methods and processes into our package. And just kind of mention some of them, or some of the most important ones, is we have a security operations center that's monitoring all of your network traffic, any kind of potential threats, any red flags. We always have a way of sort of seeing what's happening, and we have a way of escalating and stopping threats before they actually become a threat. Of course, anti-malware and antivirus is included. The great benefit of this is that you no longer have to secure your local workstation, or you don't have to manage your endpoints. We provide you with an enterprise-grade dedicated firewall. Essentially the same thing that a Goldman Sachs has in their data centers. Is the top of the line hardware, software that will keep you and your data, or kind of put a perimeter defense or an edge around your whole environment, so that every single file that goes in or out of the system would have to go through that utility. We include encryption for all of the data, all of the backups in transition and at rest. Multi-factor authentication is included at no additional cost. We encourage all of our customers to use it, but believe it or not, not many, but some of them still choose not to use that technology just because it takes an extra 15 seconds to log into your workstation. URL filtering is a pretty popular service that we provide. We can block certain websites, we can blacklist whole countries. Well, that's actually geofencing. I'm kind of jumping ahead. But let's say if your company had a corporate policy of not allowing Facebook use during your work hours, or even blacklisting something as Dropbox, we have a way of doing that. And then when it comes down to compliance, we can provide you with custom reports, whether on a monthly, weekly, or bi-weekly basis. We can meet requirements of essentially any regulator. Every single private cloud that we provide is built to NIST 800-171 framework, which is a framework for cybersecurity and digital risk management that government contractors rely on. Of course, our security and compliance is always evolving. We like to talk about it a lot. And if you want to take it offline and talk about the future and what we're doing, we would be happy to kind of give you a roadmap of where TetherView is going and where the cybersecurity industry is moving as a whole.
You know, and the other thing I want to highlight here is all this is included in our flat fee pricing. And the reason we do that is evolving. There is no other place where you're going to get the inordinate amount of data and visibility on your network without having to pay for each one of these pieces. You'll never be able to do this at an Amazon, or you could, but your budget would be at least 10 times what it costs to do it at TetherView. And then your cost to maintain that would be also a really, really, really big piece. You know, try calling a private cloud, right? Our support services are white glove. We dedicate an engineer to you as your primary point of contact. So our goal is to have you call with that familiar name and get used to that. So, you know, our service is second to none. So as we're wrapping up, if you have any questions, please post them here. If you'd like a complimentary risk assessment, cyber risk assessment, you know, please respond. I'm gonna post this last question here, you know, or reach out to us. So if you'd like a complimentary risk assessment, please let us know. Happy to provide that to you. And if you would like pricing, a quote, get to know us a little bit more, please reach out. We will provide you with a network questionnaire where we get to understand your environment a little bit more, and then from there we could give you pricing. So really thank you for joining us today. Key takeaways here are understand what your value at risk is. You know, if you're trying to predict what your IT costs are in the future, really, really get down there and make sure that you're honest with yourselves and with your folks, and try to look back in time and figure out what you've spent that's really in the IT bucket. So again, thanks for joining us today. Look forward to hearing from you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Vlad, or Brian, whose information is here on the Q&A contact info slide. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.